The forward camp lay just beyond the rise, where the jungle thinned enough to make room for gravel pads and camouflage netting. Palms swayed under morning heat, and the air smelled of cordite and sun-baked nylon. A sniper team prepped under the shade of a sagging tarp, sorting gear and clipping range cards to chest rigs. Boots thudded over packed dirt. A pair of operators passed a canteen back and forth while arguing about angles of fire on the western slope. Sierra sat 3 meters back. Not with them. Not apart. But something else entirely. She knelt beside a weatherproof crate with a fold-out terrain map stretched across its lid. Her fingers moved carefully over each line, brushing ridgelines and tracing valleys as if they could shift beneath her touch. The map was faded in places, worn soft at the edges. But the marks on it were fresh. Black ink lines, blue grease pencil, sector notations. The largest was circled twice and labeled in her handwriting, Echo Nest. No one commented on the map. No one leaned over her shoulder. A younger scout, tall and red-faced from the climb up, passed behind her and mumbled something about needing the comms assistant to check signal clarity. He didn't wait for a reply. He didn't know her name. Sierra wore plain gear. No rank. No call sign. No badge. Her boots were scuffed and quiet. Her shirt was long-sleeved and sweat darkened across the spine. A net of faded ghillie fabric was folded tight over one shoulder, pinned beneath the strap of her field harness. She carried no rifle. Only a rolled mat, a set of pencils, and a small, cloth-bound journal tucked behind her hip. Roan, the team lead, shouted across the clearing as he slung his long gun and adjusted his side pouch. He glanced in Sierra's direction but didn't speak to her directly. Instead, he waved a hand toward the gear pile and said loud enough for the others to hear, "If we get hit on the ridge line, at least we've got a decoy." A few laughs followed, light, not cruel, but dismissive in the way only practiced camaraderie could be. Sierra didn't flinch. She capped her pen and folded the map with clean, deliberate motion. The creases fell into place like muscle memory. She slipped it into her satchel and adjusted the net on her shoulder without comment. Around her, the group's energy swelled clicks of gear buckles, static from radios, the scrape of a bolt drawn and reset for no reason except to feel the weight. The team was moving out. A private glanced her way and raised an eyebrow. He leaned toward Roan and whispered something behind a gloved hand. Roan shrugged. Maybe she's a spotter. Maybe she's here to take notes. Who knows? Sierra reached for the water bottle beside her boot and took one measured sip. The taste was metallic, a trace of heat still clinging to the plastic from where it had sat in the sun. She looked toward the jungle, toward the shaded valley where the ridge dropped into Echo Nest. The trees down there grew close together. Vines hung like curtains between branches. The sunlight broke in slats and flickers. It was the kind of place that swallowed sound, even breath. She knew no one was watching her. They had already moved on. 2 members of the squad checked their optics and nodded. One of them muttered something about being late to their patrol window. Another cursed as he tried to tighten a loose strap. No one noticed Sierra stand. No one marked the moment when she stepped beyond the gravel line, moving slowly toward the brush. Her feet found the quiet spaces. Her knees bent just slightly as she passed under a hanging cable. She disappeared between ferns with the ease of someone returning to a place she already knew. The jungle caught her scent and held it. Heat pressed close. Sweat traced the inside of her collar. Her hand brushed aside a spider thread before it could stretch across her cheek. The ghillie net uncoiled as she moved, falling over her back in loose strands that blurred the outline of her frame. Behind her, a voice called out, "Hey, where's the comms kit?" Another answered, "Wasn't that with the—" Then their voices faded. The camp receded. Sierra kept moving. Her boots shifted from gravel to soil to moss. Each step dissolved into silence. She pulled her gloves from her belt and slipped them on one finger at a time. A single vine draped over her shoulder, trailing behind her like a veil. Her breath slowed, her eyes adjusted. The slope began to rise. She did not change pace. Veil of vines, breath held. By the time the first team crossed the second ridge, Sierra was already gone. She had not signed a roster. She had not been briefed. She had not taken a weapon from the rack. But she moved as if she had done all of that already, quietly, in her own time, long before anyone else had opened their eyes. No one called her name. No one asked where she was going. And so, no one knew. The jungle swallowed sound. Cicadas pulsed in waves, a steady thrum beneath the canopy. Heat pressed down from every angle, soaked into her sleeves, turned each breath into weight. Sierra moved with her belly pressed flat to the earth, elbows tucked, knees dragging forward inch by inch through damp leaves and soft mud. Her hands never broke the surface ahead of her. She felt her way forward through tension and habit, like a current pulling her deeper beneath the noise. The slope pitched gently downward before lifting again into ridgeline cover. Tree roots curled like knuckles above the surface, and ferns pressed in thick on either side of her crawl line. Every few feet, she paused to listen, not for voices or movement, but for absence. The way the jungle changed when it held something unnatural. A gap in bird calls. A breath held too long. The silence of intent. She saw it first in the broken stem angled at the wrong direction, snapped from below rather than crushed from above. Then again, in the way the moss flattened between a twin root yoke, compressed just enough to leave shape but not trail. Whoever moved through here had done so recently and carefully. Sierra shifted slightly left, rebalancing her weight onto her rib cage. The ghillie net wrapped over her back blended with the forest floor. Leaves stitched in from 4 zones, their moisture darkening her gear until it matched the undergrowth. Her cheek pressed against the dirt. Jungle mud clung there like a second skin, cooling slightly as it dried around the edge of her jaw. She exhaled once, slow and steady, through her nose. Then again, movement was not the task. Stillness was. She waited. A breeze moved through the canopy high above, brushing the upper fronds. That was her moment. She pushed forward exactly 10 centimeters, adjusted her weight, then froze again. Her right hand crept back to the rifle at her side, fingers finding the bolt handle with familiarity that required no sight. With the slightest pressure, she rotated the bolt. It clicked back into ready. A soft, metallic tension settled into place. Trigger breaks like ice cracking. She didn't fire. She didn't chamber. But the act of readiness itself was the point. She had tested the feel of the weapon in its current humidity, confirmed that it still lived in her hands. To her right, the slope dropped into deeper brush. A hawk cried out from somewhere unseen, sharp, perfectly spaced. Then again, too rhythmic, not real. Her body responded with micro-adjustments, a drop in shoulder tension, a tucking of the knee, a change in breath cadence. It was a code, a signal. Someone was marking the grid. The enemy counter-sniper squad was here. Sierra did not panic. Her pulse slowed in response, not out of effort but out of trained certainty. She let the sound pass. The forest held its breath. She matched it. A beetle crawled across her glove. She didn't move. Minutes passed in silence, measured only by heartbeat and moisture loss. Her eye caught the glint of something 10 meters upslope. Glass. A lens. Not aimed. Just settled into a ready posture on a tripod. A sniper nest. She didn't reach for the scope. She studied the light, the angle, the layers of fern near the base of the sighting structure. They had good concealment, but not good enough. The smell of sweat drifted faintly on the edge of the air current. Not hers. Someone nearby. She let the breeze guide her next motion, a slow arc forward, low and tight. Then, into another fold of foliage. A clipped leaf brushed gently against her lens hood and stuck. It didn't fall away. It remained, unreadable and deliberate, like a warning she had already accounted for. She froze again. The sun had shifted slightly above, warming the upper canopy. Heat shimmer began to rise in waves off the leaves. It would distort optics soon. She adjusted her position to avoid catching thermal reflection. The rifle stayed unslung. No shot yet. Not here. This was the veil line. The outer edge where the field of movement ended and the control of the zone began. From here, every sound mattered. Every breath. Calculated. She slowed her breathing further, a technique long practiced 4 seconds in. 6 out. Held without tension. Her cheek remained against the mud. Her eyes scanned the pattern ahead. Another hawk call came. Closer this time. The enemy was communicating position shifts. They still hadn't seen her, still hadn't sensed the shape of her body woven into the ground they occupied. She did not flinch. She did not twitch. She let the silence hold her like a second layer of netting. And then she stopped entirely. No movement, no sound. She waited for the mistake they didn't know they were going to make. Sierra settled into the crease of the slope just below the ridgeline. The ground beneath her was soft but uneven, broken by root webs and old rockfall. Her body adjusted with slow calibration. She didn't look like anything. She wasn't there to be looked at. Through the scope, the counter-sniper team came into view. 3 operators, perfectly spaced across the terrain, worked in quiet sync. The first was crouched behind a brush-covered rise, a long rifle balanced across a bipod with its muzzle pointed downslope. His eyes tracked a field no one else had entered yet. He didn't know that Sierra had already been there. The second sat mid-slope in a tripod nest. His setup was clean, elevated for crossfire, his optic hooded to reduce glare. From his angle, he would cover any flanking approach. He rotated in slow, deliberate arcs, scanning like a pendulum. His posture was confident. No tension in the spine. He thought they had the advantage. The third was tucked into a shallow rock shelf above both of them, binoculars resting on his knees, headset mic angled toward his mouth. His role was overwatch and command relay. The way he moved measured. Minimal suggested rank. He nodded every few minutes, relaying unseen affirmations. Their radios clicked softly. A faint voice said, "Sector still clean." Another followed. "Sweep clear. Holding pattern." They spoke without urgency. Their cadence belonged to men who had run this kind of hold a dozen times before. Nothing in their tone suggested threat. Sierra listened to all of it. She didn't blink. Her body barely shifted as she adjusted the bipod into the earth. She counted arc overlaps and the timing of their visual sweeps. 1 every 18 seconds. 1 every 21. 1 randomized. The third rotated at his own discretion. She clocked it all. Internal rhythms matched to environmental cues. She mapped their coverage in her mind like a time-lapse overlay. Vectors of silence. Dead zones in their field of view. If they had been one unit operating as a whole, the gaps would have been too narrow to exploit. But they were independent, confident. That was their flaw. The spotter in the tripod nest began a new sweep. His optic passed near her location, not close enough to tag heat, but enough to pause him. He squinted, tilted slightly, waited, then moved on. Sierra's breath did not change. She placed her finger over the bolt and moved it into position. The metal shifted without resistance. Her glove barely registered the touch. Her cheek remained pressed to the cheek pad, spine aligned. The scope magnification held steady. There was a bead of sweat collecting on her right cheekbone. It did not fall. The mid-slope shooter exhaled and recentered his optic. His chest rose. His hands adjusted his support elbow. He looked calm, unaware. Sierra focused on his ribline. Her fingers settled over the trigger, bent at the second joint. No tension. Just contact. Not being seen, only felt. The shot came like a drop of silence cracking the surface of still air. The suppressor caught the noise, shaped it into something that barely echoed. The sound didn't travel. The result did. The man slumped forward as if sleep had taken him mid-scan. His hand slid off the grip, his head lowered gently. There was no fall, no spasm, no burst. He simply stopped moving. The other two didn't understand. Not yet. Echo 1 came a voice through the comms. Status. No reply. Do you see her? Where did that come from? Sierra did not move. The Overwatch sniper scanned the area below, eyes narrowing, head shifting slightly. His hands tensed on the binoculars. He ducked slightly behind his rock cover, unsure whether to call for extraction or adjust position. The lower shooter behind the brush looked up at him. Then, toward the spot where their man had dropped. Nothing moved. The brush below the tripod nest looked the same. No pattern disturbed, no trail burned, just stillness. Sierra had already adjusted her angle. Her right elbow dug slightly into a crushed fern, its leaf torn and flattened beneath her weight. The shape of it fanned like a wing. She felt it but didn't shift. Her barrel tracked upward. Her cheek stayed tight to the stock. Her scope lens followed the small twitch of the Overwatch's shoulder. The radio cracked again. Contact left. Repeat. Is this contact? Sierra listened. The Overwatch still hadn't made a move. She eased her breath. Her left hand nudged the stock by a half-degree. Her thumb pressed into the synthetic cheek rest for grip. Her right finger held still. The target shifted forward to speak. His mouth opened. Sierra's second shot never sounded like one. The sound vanished into the forest, swallowed by leaves and humidity and slope. The Overwatch folded backward onto the rock shelf, body arcing slightly as balance failed. He slid behind the ledge and out of view. The radio clicked once, then went quiet. The last sniper froze. His hand hovered near the scope. His rifle still tracked the original vector, the one that didn't matter anymore. He whispered something into the mic. Sierra couldn't hear the words, but she saw the way his shoulders changed. He was alone now. He didn't know why. Sierra did not move. Her rifle shifted no more than a breath's width. Her cheek was damp with sweat and pressure. Her gloved finger remained on the trigger, still bent, but not yet spent. Mastery wasn't dominance. It was control so complete that no one noticed until it was already done. The forest held still. One body lay slumped over the tripod nest, his weapon unmoved, his headset crooked against his temple. The Overwatch above him hadn't seen the fall, not clearly. The foliage was too thick, the angle too steep, but the silence on the radio began to stretch thin. Something was wrong, and they didn't yet know what. Echo 1, check in. Nothing. Rook, do you see her? Where's the shot coming from? I don't... The voice cracked with static, half-transmit, and then stopped mid-sentence. Sierra watched the spotter shift in his position. The man ducked, turned halfway, rose just enough to try and get a better line of sight. He was tall, armored lightly, moving like someone who didn't expect to die today. His left hand swept the edge of the brush as he pulled the rifle closer and adjusted his stance. She had already set the angle. There was no rush, no breath held. She exhaled, quiet and full. Her finger curved in with no tension. The round left the chamber without sound. The man folded forward like a pocket knife, his weight dragging him down before he understood it had come. No struggle, no call, just collapse. The Overwatch sniper saw it. Not clearly, but enough. He reacted fast, the way trained men do when a team breaks without warning. He didn't go to ground. He didn't radio for air support. He ran. Down the slope, feet slapping dirt, rifle bouncing hard against his back. He tore through vines, slipping on fern roots and half-fallen bark. His voice hit the radio again. Contact. Left. Ridge. Break. Contact. Sierra did not follow him. She shifted her knee an inch to the right and let her body settle again. Her rifle trailed him through the scope, the barrel unmoving, just her breath adjusting the view. She counted his strides. 5, 8, 11. He tripped, caught himself, kept running. A leaf stuck to the sweat on his cheek. His eyes were wide. His weapon never cleared the sling. She waited until he reached the clearing at the base of the slope. He paused for cover, half spun toward the ridge. He looked for threat, but too high, too late. Her reticle found his shoulder line, then the collar seam, then his jaw. She held the breath in her lungs a moment longer. The third shot made no sound worth naming. His knees gave first, then the rest followed. The radio he had clipped to his belt tumbled sideways and blinked twice before going still. There was no scream, no call-out, only a last burst of motion that had nowhere to go. Sierra lowered the rifle slowly. 3, done. A lizard watched her from a flat stone just to the left of her elbow. It didn't run. It blinked once, shifted a leg, then froze again. She stayed still for another 30 seconds, listening. No follow-up comms, no terrain movement, no echoes. The jungle exhaled once more, returned to heat and insect rhythm. Her rifle's chamber clicked softly as she opened the bolt. Steam rose from the metal. She removed the spent casing, set it beside her pack, and reloaded a fresh round with slow precision. One round, out of respect for the habit. She did not expect to use it. A whisper left her throat. Soft, almost shaped by breath alone. Nest is clear. It went out on a secure low-band channel, one she wasn't assigned. No response came back. No one was listening. Her team was still kilometers behind, unaware that anything had happened. Sierra rolled her shoulders once and reached for her utility cloth. She wiped the scope, careful not to smudge the outer glass. Her gloves were damp. Mud caked under the first joint of her right index finger. Her cheek was sore from the pressure against the cheek rest. She shifted to her knees. The bodies were no longer visible through the scope. The forest was beginning to fold back over them. Ferns moved in the breeze. Dust drifted off the ridge. She reached forward and retrieved the brass from the first shot. Then the second. She left the third. A message, though no one would understand it yet. The broken radio blinked once more before its battery died. Sierra turned from it. Her exit crawl took longer than the approach. She didn't rush. She didn't rise to her feet. She folded back into the terrain the same way she had entered it minute by minute, rhythm by breath. At one point she paused beside a tree root shaped like a step and leaned for half a second against it. Her ribs ached from the tension. Her jaw clicked faintly. She smiled once, almost without realizing it. Years ago, she had failed her final marksmanship trial. Not for missing, not for panic, but because she hadn't spoken when ordered. The instructor had barked for confirmation mid-crawl. She had stayed silent, not out of fear, but purpose. That silence was her gift. They marked it as insubordination. The board called it incomplete. She remembered that now. Here in the heat and green and silence, she was never incomplete. The ground gave gently under her boots as she withdrew past the veil line, already erasing her path behind her. No celebration, no footage, no call sign announced. Only quiet, and a forest that no longer held the threat it once did. The drone feed crackled once, then stabilized into full-frame resolution. A tech adjusted the contrast and zoomed in over grid Sierra 12. The image sharpened just enough to reveal the outlines of 3 bodies, spaced evenly in a loose triangle along a natural slope. One slumped over a tripod nest. One lay behind a rocky ledge. The third had fallen halfway into brush, his headset still clipped to a shoulder strap. In the command tent, Roan stared at the screen with narrowed eyes. His coffee sat untouched beside a field tablet. He hadn't spoken in almost a minute. Whose team was in that sector, he asked quietly. The analyst next to him shook his head. None of ours. That zone wasn't cleared for entry. Was that an air asset, Roan asked. No air, no overflight, no signature. Roan leaned closer, scanning for any hint of breach. Then where's the breach point? You're telling me someone walked in, took 3 shooters, and left without leaving a trail. The tech scrolled the timeline backward. No thermal track on approach, no displacement signatures, no heat bloom. The slope doesn't show any optical ripple. Roan rubbed the back of his neck. The image on screen was still. Too still. That doesn't happen. People don't move through that ridge without showing up on something. Unless they weren't people. Someone muttered from across the table. A second analyst chimed in. Kill markers just updated. All 3 entries are tagged by Operator 6-1. Roan turned his head slowly. Who the hell is Operator 6-1? A pause, then a voice from the comms bay. Quiet but certain. I think that's her. He turned further and saw one of the younger scouts, the same one who had mistaken Sierra for a comms assistant earlier that morning. The scout didn't meet his eyes, just looked back at the screen. Roan stepped forward again, scanning the kill triangle once more. No overhead, no entry, no flash, just 3 down. The tech tapped a key and brought up a side panel. I've got no signature trail, no lens flare, no muzzle bloom. It's like the shots came from nowhere. The screen showed a terrain model with sensor overlays. Every box was clean, every monitor silent. Sierra had been in and out without leaving a footprint anyone could trace. At the far edge of the camp, Sierra stood alone at the wash basin. Her gloves were off. Mud streaked the side of her face. The sleeves of her undershirt were rolled high above her elbows. She dipped one hand in the cold water and let it run down her forearm, clearing away grit and leaf pulp. The motion was slow, methodical, not tired, just quiet. The basin water turned dark from runoff. She didn't look at the others. She didn't watch the screen. Roan walked out from the command tent with short, deliberate steps. He stopped a few meters away, unsure what to say. His rifle was slung across his back, untouched since briefing. She didn't turn. He cleared his throat and spoke low. When did you... He trailed off. The words didn't line up. Sierra reached for the small towel clipped to her belt. She patted her hands dry, one at a time, careful not to smear anything. Then she stepped to the side and unzipped her rifle case. It lay on the gravel beside the basin, still sealed since her return. She placed the rifle inside without ceremony, adjusted the strap, sealed it shut. Roan took a step closer. You went alone. She didn't reply. A few others had gathered near the tent edge, watching in silence. One of the younger soldiers glanced between Sierra and the drone screen inside. His voice came out softer than he expected. I didn't even hear the shots. Another added, they didn't either. No one asked what weapon she had used. No one asked how she got past the thermal net or why her name wasn't listed on any unit file. They looked at the rifle case, the basin, the smear of dried mud still across her cheekbone, and they started to understand. The drone feed kept running in the background. Still 3 bodies, still no entry path. The jungle looked untouched. Inside the tent, the analyst adjusted the saturation on the feed and tried again to identify the angle of entry. He found nothing. Back outside. Sierra lifted the strap of her rifle case and stood without a sound. She glanced once toward the tree line beyond the camp. The wind had shifted. Leaves stirred in low spirals across the dirt. The basin water rippled gently behind her. No rank, no call sign, no announcement. But everyone who saw the screen, and then saw her, now understood what had happened. Not being seen, only felt. The debrief room stayed dim, lit only by the glow of 2 monitors and the thin sweep of daylight creeping through canvas gaps. The temperature inside hovered just above tolerable, but no one moved to adjust the fan. Every head in the room faced the central screen, where a split view cycled between thermal replay and terrain telemetry. The footage ran without sound. One moment, the slope held 3 stationary heat signatures. The next, one dropped, then another, then the third. No flash, no bloom. The thermal trace showed no movement until after the final body had settled into stillness. The entire sequence took less than 3 minutes. The lead analyst folded his arms, eyes narrowed. This wasn't defensive fire. Someone behind him nodded. It was preemptive control. The operations chief leaned closer to the panel. Are we sure that tag is correct? Operator 6-1. It pinged across all 3 engagements. Same angle origin, same impact rate, all logged inside the system. Another voice, quieter now. She neutralized a full counter-squad solo. The room stayed silent for a moment. She didn't react. One of the younger analysts finally said, "She orchestrated." The screen shifted to an overhead snapshot. The triangular pattern of the enemy team was clean, predictable. But their lines of fire never overlapped the entry path because there hadn't been one. Sierra had crawled in under their cone of observation, fired 3 times, and left without leaving a heat signature the drone net could detect. It wasn't a rescue. It was a removal. And no one had known they were in danger until the danger was already over. Back at camp, the conversation had shifted into whispers. A junior soldier stood near the basin where Sierra had washed her hands earlier. He held a field cap in one hand and stared at the tree line without really focusing on it. He didn't speak until another scout walked up beside him. How'd she know? The first asked. The second didn't answer right away. He looked out past the tents, past the packs piled under the tarp, past the gravel line that marked the camp boundary. Then he said, "Because she was already there." Sierra sat alone near the rear slope of the ridgeline, away from the noise, outside the light. A battered supply crate served as her seat. She had her boots braced against the slope and her hands resting on her knees. Her rifle case was beside her, unopened. The ghillie net was folded and tucked under her arm like a blanket never used. Wind stirred the edge of the canvas behind her, pulling a corner into a soft flutter. She didn't notice. In her left hand, she held something small. It wasn't hers. The sniper coin had weight to it, even though it barely covered her palm. It was blackened around the edges, probably from heat and wear. The insignia was scratched through, but the shape was clear. The crest marked a school few talked about and fewer passed. She had found it on the body of the first man she dropped. It had rolled a few inches from his gear pouch. She had picked it up before leaving, not for proof, not for possession, but because it belonged in a quieter place now. She turned it slowly between her fingers once, then closed her hand around it. No one watched her. She didn't ask for debrief. No officer called her in. But the screen in the command room continued to loop the footage, and her call sign blinked again, faint at the bottom left of the feed. Operator 6-1. Someone would match the number to the name. Someone would file the footage. Others would take credit. The higher-ups would likely frame it as an environmental malfunction or opportunistic timing. But the ones who had seen the screen, the pattern, the precision, they would remember. Because now they understood. She had been there the whole time, and she had made sure none of them had to be. You followed the story of a woman who was never given a name until her actions earned one. Sierra was overlooked, unranked, and unspoken. Yet she carried the weight of skill and certainty in silence. Her strength did not come from commands or titles, but from the stillness she mastered and the danger she ended before others knew it had begun. This was not a story of spectacle. It was a story of presence, of knowing what must be done, even when no one is watching. In a world that often rewards noise, Sierra reminds us that there is power in the quiet and worth in every step unseen. If her story moved you, take a moment to reflect on who in your life carries that same quiet strength. Share your thoughts below, not so, and follow for more stories where silence is not weakness, but resolve.